So I went to Learn Test Pass and grabbed the closing disclosure, the blank CD. So you guys have access to that. I'll show you in just a second where it's at. So where's Learn Test Pass? Yeah, so I just downloaded it. But you're going to want to remember, you can practice online, but for your exam, you need the actual paper copy to write on. So in the 6A material and Learn Test Pass, no, that's not right. I'm sorry. 6B material. Anyway, it's the 6. Just remember 6 and be one or the other. And you got the blank closing disclosure. So then you can download it, as many copies as you need to practice to get ready for next Sunday. So this is the one that we're going to do in class. Excuse me. This is the one we're going to do in class together. The solutions for this one, it's already worked out. So if you want to see a completed one this week when you're looking, you have that here. And of course, you'll have any notes that you take right now. So I have, can everybody see this okay? I have my closing disclosure on the left and then the problem that we're going to work on the right. When you guys do these closing disclosures, first off, the math on the exam is going to take you the longest. It's going to be the longest part. So I always want you to save the math for last. The math is at the end of the exam. So if you just do everything else and then save your 6 math problems for the end, specifically these 4 related to the closing disclosure. Now, again, you guys have 3 hours for your test next Sunday. I think your other post-licensing classes, you only get like an hour or 2. But because of the math on this exam, you have 3 hours, so you'll have plenty of time. When you guys do these, don't skip around. If you skip around, you're bound to skip something. So go in order of the problem. Start at the top and work your way down. You're not necessarily looking to fill in all these blanks as you are looking to take this information and plug it in here. Does that make sense? Every single transaction is different. And for those of you that have are out practicing or out working with buyers and sellers, you know that every single transaction is different. I mean, consider this. Every property, every seller, and every buyer are different, which makes for a unique transaction every single time. And with the uniqueness of the transactions comes our closing disclosure. So you're not going to have one that looks like the other the next time and the time after that, which is again why we spend so much time working on this in contracts and closings. And when you start working with buyers and sellers and you start reviewing these on behalf of your client, you know, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to go to your peers or your broker in charge and say, hey, do you mind, you know, putting a second set of eyes on this? You owe that to your client. Everybody good with that? This is a duty. This is part of our fiduciary responsibilities to make sure that their end numbers are correct. So we're going to go through these and line by line. Again, for our purposes, I'm not going to do a separate CD for a buyer and a separate CD for a seller. So for our purposes, we're going to break RESPA violation and we're going to put both buyer and seller on the same CD. You're probably going to want to do the same thing for your exam too, just for simplicity. And as I've been saying, a big chunk of these is knowing where the stuff goes. So the more CDs you go, the more you're like, oh, the sales price on page 2. Oh, the, you know, commissions on page 1. The more of these you do, the more familiar with this form that you'll be. Any questions before we get started? Anything we talked about this? Yeah.
I have one. So for purposes of the test, are the math questions not multiple choice or at least answers?
All of your, yep, everything is multiple choice. Yep.
And so, and based on your experience, they'll take a long time to figure out? I'm surprised.
You can plan it about 30 minutes. I'd say 20-30 minutes to do one of these. It depends on how many you do before test time, right? If you don't practice at all, it could take you a lot longer. But if you do a few and you get familiar with it, yeah, I'd say about 20-30 minutes to get through one of these. Which is why I want you to save it to the end. I don't want you working, spending all your time on this and run out of time with other stuff. So save it to the end, and yeah, everything's multiple choice.
Thanks, Julie.
Any other questions before we get started? We're ready to just jump right in. So this is our fact situation for sample closing statement. We're told to use a 365-day year. You are just in time. So you got your settlement date, November 23rd. When I have the paper in my hand, when I actually have the blank closing disclosure in my hand, I try to just jot the date down at the top of both pages, page 1 and page 2, just for me, just to save myself some time, because I know I got to refer back to that closing date periodically. So that's just a trick that I do. I just write 11/23 on the top of both pages, so I know where I can find it when I need it. And we start with the sales price. There's no personal property. The sales price is $249,650. The sales price is one of those double entry things, which means we're going to see it twice. And the sales price is between who? It's between the buyer and the seller. It's between the parties to the contract, right? So we're going to see the sales price is going to be a debit to the buyer and a credit to the seller. The buyer is giving the seller that money. That's the gist of our 15-page offer to purchase a contract. It takes us 15 pages to say, for $249,650 in exchange, you give me your property. We're long-winded, right? So our sales price, the $249,650, is between the buyer and the seller. So we're going to look at that on page 2. And it tells us under K1 that a debit to the buyer due from the borrower at closing is the sales price of the property, $249,650. I try when I'm filling these in to get my numbers to the far right edge so I can see them. I don't want a number to get buried over here somewhere and me not see it. Does everybody see what I'm saying? So when I fill in my blank closing disclosure, I put my numbers out here, so then I can just straight line add when I'm done instead of hunting and pecking. So we got $249,650 debit the buyer and $249,650 credit the seller, both for the purchase price. Questions so far? Debit the buyer, credit the seller. The buyer's K's of the buyer's debits are K. The seller's credits are M, as in Mary. Yeah.
I'm not sure about anybody else, but the almost a whole bunch of the left-hand side of that's cut off of my screen.
Oh, over here?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm
So I can see the letters. It just helps me in my head.
right. And the only thing I can
But-
do is to make that smaller.
Yeah. And if you can't, that's okay.
So if I make it smaller. Can you guys still see everything? Can you still
Yeah.
see it? Okay.
Yeah, I just know you're gonna be using the letters and we're all gonna be
Yep.
looking.
Yep. Thank you. This is where I miss my whiteboard. And again, just being able to be, it's so much easier when I was with you guys and I could like hand you stuff and say, here you go. But we make the best of what we got, right? So thank you. Let's see, real property taxes paid by the seller before closing, and we're told to prorate at closing. When you guys see the word prorate, without even thinking about it, I want you to draw your arrow. I want you to see your timeline here. I want you to see what it is that you're prorating. So in this case, I'm prorating this year's taxes. This year runs from January 1st to December 31st. The thing that divides this year, the thing that separates this year is the day of settlement, which I think we just said was November 23rd. Does that sound right? Seller owns a property the front part of the year. Buyer owns a property the latter part of the year. I took that sentence, real property taxes paid by seller before closing, and I put it into a visual. And if you're like, I'm such a visual person, I like pictures. And if you're like me, I like to be able to see the visual of what it is that I'm working with. So if taxes have been paid, the seller has already paid taxes for the year. Now you can stop and ask yourself, who owes whom? Why don't you guys share with me in the chat? You can either tell everyone or tell me directly. If the taxes for the year have been paid, who owes whom? Yep. Have been paid. Yep. So the buyer owes the seller, right? Taxes have been paid. So the buyer has to reimburse, if you will, the seller for the year that they own the property. Their responsibility, not the year, the period of time of the year that they own the property. So it's going to shake out on our settlement statement as a debit the buyer, credit the seller. The buyer has to give the seller some money. It's the other thing about this, I don't have much room to work, so y'all just bear with me. Buyer owes the seller for the day after settlement to the end of the year. Because isn't that the buyer's responsibility? They're responsible for the period of time that they own the property. The seller gets to pay taxes for settlement. The buyer owes the seller for the day after through the end of the year. They start paying taxes tomorrow, which is November 24th, 25th, 26th, 27, 28, 29, and 30. There's 30 days in November. So they owe for 7 days in November plus 31 days in December. The buyer owes the seller for 38 days. Any questions on how I got 38 days? I actually counted on my fingers. No shame whatsoever. Now we take our annual taxes. The problem tells us 2,471. And I divide by 365 to get daily taxes. So 2,471 divided by 365 gives me daily taxes of 0.769863. You get something like that on a calculator. Let's talk about rounding for just a second, because I said we would. The suggestion with rounding is that you go out at least 3 decimal places, and then at the very end you round. So this is what I got on my calculator. If I wanted to round that, I'd really be looking at, let's see, 77, right? Something like that. If you just want to go out 2 or 3, just don't get carried away. Don't just round a whole dollars, right? Don't go crazy with your rounding. There's going to be change. You're going to have some change. But rest assured, you guys, you can't miss a problem by rounding alone. So if you put 68 or 78 cents here and I put 77 or 76 cents, right? If we're off by a couple pennies, the answer choices, the multiple choice answer choices aren't so close that you can miss by rounding alone. I can almost promise you there will be an answer choice off by $6.76, banking on you not counting your days right. But you can't miss by rounding, as long as you don't go too crazy. Go out at least 2. For my general rule of thumb, I try not to clear my calculator any more than I have to. So when I get this big long number, 6 point I'm just going to try to work with that. The less time you touch your calculator, the less room for human error that you have. So if you don't have to touch it, then you can't, hit a wrong button or something. So for me, I try not to clear it. I took my 2471 divided by 365, and I got 6.769863. And then I'm going to take that number without even clearing my calculator, and I'm going to say times 38. And that's going to give me And here I'm going to round 257.25. That's the exact. If you want to be precise, and I hear you, you are my people, and you want to be exact and you want to be precise, then just don't clear your calculator. But if you do want to round, at least go out 2, 3. So $257. Daily taxes are about $6.77. We figured out that there's 38 days. So daily or taxes for the rest of the year, the buyer will owe the seller $257.25. Any questions on how I got that number? Buyer owes the seller, and then we'll talk about where we put it. So if we go back to our closing disclosure, remember, K is all the buyer's debits. You see where it says due from the borrower? M is in Mary is all the seller's credits. You see where it says due to the seller. See, if you're, once you guys get familiar with the CD, it'll tell you what to put stuff where, right? Due from is a debit, to is a credit. So because we decided this is going to be a debit the buyer, credit the seller, and guys, for our test, we're not getting the breakdown of city, county taxes and school taxes and municipalities and fire and da da da. We're just getting one tax amount. So in the real world, you may see these taxes broken down into city, county, but for our purposes, we just have one amount. And we decided that this was going to be a debit to the buyer of $257.25. And a credit to the seller. It's a double entry. It's a debit to one party and a credit to the other for the same amount. So we debit the buyer in K, and we credit the seller in M. Again, essentially what's happening is the buyer is giving the seller at settlement their portion of the taxes. Since the buyer has reimbursed the seller in this case, do both parties feel that this was fair now? Both parties were responsible for the taxes for the period of time that they own the property. And that's all we're doing with prorating. We're just making it fair. Questions on that? Anything about that? Let's see if we can put that there.
If you want to make it where you can like show the math and still have this stuff clear, you can open like a Google Doc and just switch back and forth, just so it's not so jumbled, so people don't get confused.
Yeah, and I'm gonna rate this racist in a second. I know I like my Word document, but with this, I guess I think my worksheet's yeah, you know, people, we went on Zoom and so many instructors invested in all these iPads so they could have a whiteboard. I'm like, whatever, just give me a Word document. I can, that's what I call my whiteboard. I save money when and where I can, you know. So everybody have the math. As I said, I'm getting ready to erase it because it could get very jumbled if I don't. Everybody have the math on how we got to the 257.25, and everybody good. We put it in two places. I put it in K as a debit to the buyer, and I put it in M as a credit to the seller. Okay. Moving right along, I got $500 due diligence. Dang it. That's not the program, that's me, by the way. $500 due diligence is another one of those double entry items. Let's back up for a second. Let's go back in time. Remember when we went under contract? And when we went under contract, the buyer gave the seller a due diligence check, right? We went under contract and the buyer handed the seller a check. So when we went under contract, that would have showed up as a debit to the buyer. It would have looked like a debit to the buyer, credit to the seller, right? Because the buyer actually handed the seller a check. So here you go. Now that we're at settlement, we need to reverse that. We need to do the opposite. So now that we're at settlement, we're going to do a credit the buyer, debit the seller. What's the opposite of a credit? A debit. What's the opposite of a credit? A debit is a credit. So we're reversing what we did when we went under contract. No money's changing hands at settlement, right? Buyers and sellers are not giving each the money, but it's money that changed hands as part of this transaction. Consider this, just consider this for 1 second. Let's pretend the agreed upon purchase price is $100,000. And the agreed upon due diligence amount is $500. The contract, the buyer promises to pay the seller $100,000, right? We go under contract and they give the seller $500. So now essentially the seller has the purchase price and the due diligence fee, but that's not the agreed upon amount, is it? So how do we get the seller their agreed upon amount? Now that we're here, we reverse that charge. Now, how much is the seller going to get? The seller's going to get the agreed upon amount of $100,000. So that's all we're doing with the due diligence fee, is reversing what we did when we went under contract. So now it's going to be a credit the buyer, debit the seller. And if we come down to L as in Larry, paid already buyer on behalf of the borrower, and N as in Nancy is our due from seller. So you see L6 is the due diligence fee, credit the buyer 500. And then N7, N as in Nancy 7, debit the seller 500. Credit the buyer, debit the seller. And again, if you're familiar with the form, it says due diligence fee. So it kind of tells you where to put it, but you got to be familiar with it. Questions on due diligence, why we did what we did. Then we have $3,500 in earnest money. Think about where the earnest money's been when we've been under contract. It's been hanging out in somebody's escrow account, hasn't it? Nobody's had that money. It's just been safeguarding in a third-party account. The buyer didn't give that to the seller. It's just been chilling in somebody's escrow account. Since the seller never touched that money, at settlement, the seller's not involved in the earnest money deposit. They're only involved in due diligence because they touched that money. And again, when we went under contract, the buyer paid that. So now that we're at closing, we need to reverse that, which means the earnest money will be a credit to the buyer. And you can see L is in Larry 1, gives us our deposit, which is our earnest money deposit. And remember too, buyer's agents, when you went under contract, you told your buyer, you pay the due diligence, you pay the earnest money. And when we make it to closing, those will be credited back to you. We told them they will be credited back to you. So now that we're at settlement, we have to do what we told them we would do, right? So both due diligence and earnest money will be an L as in Larry, a credit to the buyer. Due diligence will be an N as in Nancy, debit to the seller. Seller's loan payoff. The seller has an outstanding mortgage of $138,425. This is what they owe their lender to be able to clear that lien to convey clear marketable title. So the seller's loan payoff, if you look under N as in Nancy, N4, pay off a first mortgage loan, and 5 is pay off a second mortgage loan. If you got a third mortgage, you do N3 and 6, pay off a third. The seller has to pay all that off at settlement so they can convey title. So the seller's loan payoff is a debit to the seller at closing. And they calculated the payoff amount to $138,425, debit the seller. This particular lender, I can tell you this is a conventional loan with a loan to value ratio of 80% or higher. How do I know that? Because this lender's charging private mortgage insurance. Whenever you see PMI, it's a conventional loan with a loan to value ratio of 80% or more. This particular lenders can do it a couple different ways. Some lenders will take annual PMI and divide by 12, and then part of your monthly payment will be a 1/12 of your PMI. So you'll have your PI, TI, and then your PMI. This particular lender wants to collect PMI for the first year at settlement. Every lender's different. They're not created equally. So this lender's collecting $840. It has to do with the loan. So we know this is going to be a debit to who? It has to do with the new loan. So we know it's going to be, yep, a debit to the buyer. So if we come back up to page 1, F is in Frank are our prepaids. The buyer at settlement is prepaying their PMI insurance for the year, their first year of home ownership. So if you look under F2, F is in Frank 2, we'll have a debit to the buyer. And I'm going to go back up. I'll show you. I'll come back down in just a second. But remember, our first column is our borrower paid. Then you have your seller paid, and then we break those down further to buyer paid at closing, buyer paid before closing. So under my buyer paid at closing, I have PMI, and you can fill this stuff in on the side if you want to. Bottom line, I care that you get the figures right. Your test is going to ask you for the figures. But if you want to put in 12 months right there, you can. Under F2, there's $840 for mortgage insurance premium. Buyer paid at closing. Another prepaid, still in F, as in Frank. Another prepaid is our homeowner's insurance premium. Again, the buyer will have to pay on the day of settlement for their first year policy. Insurance is always paid in advance. So you pay it now and you're covered for, you make your car insurance payment today, you're covered for the next 6 months, right? You make your medical insurance payment today, you're covered for the next 30 days. So whenever you make your insurance payment, you're good for the next period. In this case, homeowners insurance is paid every year, annually. So at settlement, we're going to collect the first year premium. I'm under F1 for $684. Buyer pays for their homeowners insurance. Again, if you want to fill that in, that's up to you. $684. The attorney will cut a check to Allstate or Geico or whomever the buyer decided to go with their homeowners insurance. Why don't you guys tell me in the chat, private if you wish, who pays the deed preparation fee? Who pay? And you can tell me S or B. I know what you mean. Don't tell me BS, but you can tell me S or B. Who pays the deed preparation fee? Dang, I almost always get one of you with that. I couldn't get a one of you. Yeah, the seller pays that. Seller pays to have the deed prepared. So if we go back up, remember the seller is the second column, again, the breakdown between seller paid at closing and seller paid before closing. And if you look under C as in cat, C2, you see deed preparation. So under the seller paid at closing, you're going to put the deed preparation fee of $85. we know that the seller pays excise tax. Seller's responsible for excise tax. They're going to tax you to sell your property. They tax you when you buy it. They tax you while you own it. And they're going to get you one more time and tax you when you sell it. Just the way it is. It's called the excise tax. Excise tax is calculated off of the purchase price. Excise tax is calculated off of the purchase price. And the thing with excise tax, purchase price is $249,650. The thing with excise tax is you're never going to have change. Excise tax will always be a whole number. So there's a couple different ways to do this. My preference, if your sales price is not a number divisible by 500, what I mean by that, if your sales price doesn't end in 000 or 500, then it's not divisible by 500. So if it's not divisible by 500, then I have to make it divisible by 500. And to make it divisible by 500, we always round up to the nearest 500ths. Up. This is the government we're talking about here. So all those rules of rounding that you thought you knew go out the window. Always round up to the nearest 500. So our purchase price of $249,650, I'm going to round up to $250,000. Now I have a number divisible by 500. Everybody see what we did there? If you take $249,650 and divide it by 500, you're going to get change. When you see change due an excise tax, just stop because you know you did something wrong. Yeah, John. You're on mute. You're on mute.
I was just saying, go up to the next.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were saying, wait. No, okay. So we took our sales price, I rounded up to a number divisible by 500. So now all I have to do is divide by 500. So you take 250,000 divided by 500, and we get excise tax, seller paid of $500. The other way, however you want to see it, now you have a question, right? Okay.
Why don't they simplify that and just multiply times 0.002?
I don't know. What did you do?
The sales price times 0.002 is the same as $1 per 500.
So it is. I don't know. Yeah, do it that way if you want to do it that way. I don't know. I was always taught to divide by 500. So that's the way. Let's see. I took pre-licensing in 2008. So I guess I always just thought that was the way you did it. But that's great. That you're right. You're saying the exact same thing here, aren't you? So however you see it, however you see it. The other way, some of you like to do, take your sales price, divide by 500, 249,650, divide by 500, 499.30. You go, uh-oh, I have change. What do? Round up.
Hey, Julie.
Yeah.
Just for test purposes, where you went from 249,650 all the way to 250, you wouldn't round 249,700. I mean, it'd probably be
No, because that number is not divisible by 500. I
Oh.
got to have my sales price end in 000 or
Brain
500.
fart. Brain fart, I got you.
Yep. Or you can just take the sales price divided by 500 and then round that up. So we just learned 3 ways that you guys can calculate excise tax. I'm sure there's more. Pick your favorite one and stick with it. That's the only thing I ask, is that you guys be consistent with yourself. Because as soon as you start, I'll do it this way one time and that way the next time, then you're going to get yourself thrown off. Pick one and stick to it. Okay. So we're all in agreement, $500, no matter how you got to it. The seller owes excise tax for $500. Still on page 2, because excise tax gets paid to the government. The government's a third party. So still on page 2, under E as in Elizabeth, seller paid, you're going to put in $500. Seller pays excise tax, CDE, commission, deed prep, and excise tax, $500. E is in Elizabeth, E2. Everybody good? Can I erase all this? Okay. The survey, $400. We know the survey is a buyer's expense because it was part of their due diligence process, right? The buyer ordered the survey. Under C is in cat, 5 is a place for the survey for $400. Buyer pays at closing. There is a $450 home warranty to be paid by sellers at closing. So the sellers are paying for the home warranty for the buyer. Thank you, sellers. Home warranty company is a third party. So down here under H is in Henry, H is our other. H3 is our home warranty. Problem tells us the seller pays it. So there's $450, seller paid at closing. There's almost always some kind of courier fee or wire transfer fee or handling fee. Just another way to nickel and dime us, right? So there's $30. We good? Did you guys, are we here? Are you guys here? Okay, okay. All right, something weird just happened on my end, so I didn't, just want to make sure. Y'all know the very first class I ever taught on Zoom, the class disappeared for me and I was gone for, I was just chit-chatting away for about 20 minutes before I realized nobody else was gone. So now I'm like, are you guys here? Can you, I want to make sure I don't do that again. So courier fee, wire transfer fee, overnight fee, there's usually an extra kind of fee. Under H is in Henry. The buyer gets to pay their courier fee. The seller gets to pay their courier fee. So H4 and H5, the seller's loan payoff of $30. And then the buyer's loan payoff also of $30. Any questions so far? If I'm going too fast, please let me know. You want to let me know in the chat, please. Attorney's fee, buyer hires the attorney. So the buyer gets to pay for the attorney's fee. Back up under C, C is in cat, attorney's closing fee. Buyer pays at closing, $650. Buyer paid at closing, $650. And then we have title insurance. And when the lender's involved, you're going to have two policies and the buyer gets to pay for both of them. So there's the lender policy and then there's the owner's policy. And please, you guys, this tends to be a problem topic on the test. So let's make sure we're really good on this. When we see title insurance owner policy, we're referring to the new owner. Yesterday, they were the buyer. Today, they're the owner. So remember, that's what title insurance is doing, is protecting the owner. So today the buyer pays for it. Tomorrow, their title is insured. Their title is covered. Is everybody good with that? I think the problem topic on the test is I've seen this as a debit to the seller. But this isn't, today the seller's not the owner, are they? Yesterday they were, but today they're not the owner. So this title insurance, two policies, insurance and owner, buyer gets to pay for both. And title insurance, C is in cat, 3. Title insurance premium, lender and or owner's policy, and you can just add them up. So the lender's policy is $505.40. And the owner's policy is $64.60 for a total, oops, of $570, buyer to pay at closing. Title insurance is a one-time fee. They don't have to renew it every year. They don't have to ever pay it again. One-time fee. It covers the lender for as long as there's a loan on the property. It covers the owner for as long as they own the property until they convey it. Questions on title insurance? Everybody good that the buyer gets to pay that? And then we have recording fees, $82, breaks it down. To record the deed is $26. To record the deed of trust is $56. So under E as in Elizabeth, you have your recording fees. Again, if you want to spell it out, 26 for the deed. It's 56 for the mortgage, or in North Carolina, we're just fancy and we call it the deed of trust. So you got 26 for the deed, 56 for the deed of trust, for a total buyer to pay at closing of $82. The buyer gets to pay to have their deed recorded. The buyer also gets to pay to have their mortgage recorded. Seller pays to have the deed prepared. Buyer pays to have the deed recorded. Commission. This is important, isn't it? Commission. We think so. Commission is 6% of the sales price. Seller pays unless you're told otherwise. So we need to go, or I do, because my brain doesn't remember that. $249,650 is our sales price. And the seller has agreed to pay 6%. Commission's always paid on the sales price. I have to tell you how much, since there is no set standard fee. So total commission is $979. Now, the problem goes on. No, is that not right? No. All right, hang on. 249.
Numbers right. Your numbers right. You just said $979 instead of $14,979.
Oh, did I leave us off $14,000? Okay.
Yeah, and I want my money.
I hear you. So 14,000 details, gosh, $14,979 is the total commission. The problem tells us we're going to split that between the two firms. So in the real world, when you review these closing disclosures down here under H, under other, you're going to have two categories. Firm ABC gets X amount and firm XYZ gets X amount, right? You're going to have two firms getting paid two different commission. And it's going to name the firms and how much they're going to get. If you want to split this out for your test, you're more than welcome to. Really what I'm looking for is that $14,979. So if you want to take that, divide by 2 and put, 7,000, whatever it is, two different lines. I don't care how you do it, but bottom line, we need that full. And no, for the real world, you're going to see that. By the way, Penelope shared with us before settlement that she did before lunch, that did you say you had your commission missing or it was wrong?
Yes. It was, I got a phone call about an hour before closing that commission was off. My BIC had received the HUD before I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they caught it, which is
Yeah.
good.
But I mean,
Yeah.
I was on the way to the office, but they fixed it and it was all good.
That's all that matters, right?
Yeah.
So guys, let's talk about commission for just a second. Let's make sure, because Penelope had an incident. I had an incident once. I was the listing agent. I was reviewing my CD. The buyer's agent's name was Mike. Neither one of us had commission on the seller's CD. It was just not there. It was just not there. And I called the paralegal and I said, yeah, Mike and I want to get paid. And she said, and I quote, whoopsie. She fixed it, kind of like Penelope, what if her BIC hadn't reviewed it? What if I hadn't reviewed it? I mean, let's what ifs, you know? My seller was a very nice lady. She was actually selling the house on behalf of her dad, who had early stages of dementia, and she decided it was time to get her closer to him. So she had power of attorney, and she was, bless her heart, she was driving back and forth from Georgia to help her dad sell this little townhouse. And with the move, she had a lot going on. And she was the sweetest lady, and her dad was awesome. Every time he met me, it was like the first time that he ever met me. Like, hey, so nice to meet you. You know, such a nice, pleasant man. I'd like to think that if we missed it, we could have called her and said, oh man, silly us, we didn't get our commission. And she would have written us a check. I'd like to think that that's what would have happened if I hadn't caught it. People can prove us wrong though sometimes though. So what if she wasn't willing to cut a check? My firm very well may have had to take her to court to get our commission. So it's best to catch it ahead of time than try to deal with it after the fact. And let's think this through one step further. Seller pays commission. So whose closing disclosure is the commission going to show up on? The sellers. Is it going to be on the buyers? So if you're the buyer's agent and you're only privy to the buyer's closing disclosure, you can't verify your commission, can you? Because you may not see the seller CD. So if you're the buyer's agent and you're only privy to the seller CD, I suggest you either call the listing agent. If you have a good relationship with the listing agent, just call them and say, hey man, just want to make sure our commission's on there. Or call the paralegal and say, I just want to verify that you have my firm down to receive X amount. Buyer's agents, that's one number that you can't verify on the CD, but you need to. So you got to pick up the phone and call somebody. Mike was very appreciative of me because he had no way of knowing it wasn't there. And I told Mike what almost happened. Mike was with me, you know. Humans prepare these things and humans make mistakes. So that's why we have a second set of eyes, third set of eyes to help verify that for accuracy. So if you don't see the seller CD, that's up to the lender. Remember, it's up to the lender if they issue one or two CDs. So, and I see it sometimes where some of the seller expenses are on the buyer, so I can see both. Every lender is different though, right? So these are all going to look just a little bit different. Every attorneys actually prepare these, but they're all going to look a little bit different. And that's why the more of these you do, the more you're going to be familiar with and be comfortable with them. Questions or comments on that? Yeah.
I just did a FSBO
Uh-huh.
and the seller did not want to pay commission. So the buyers agreed.
That's their right.
Yeah, they agreed to pay my commission. And
The buyer did?
mm-hmm.
Yep.
So when I saw the CD, I saw the seller side too, but they had the paralegal had made a mistake because they charged them commission and charged my people commission.
Sweet, Donna. You could
And
have
I-
racked up on that
I
one, couldn't you?
I could have, but I told them, I said, that's wrong. So I had to be
I
honest.
had a teammate that had a closing a couple weeks ago and he went to pick his check up. He verified it on the CD, but he went to pick his check up and it was wrong.
Mhm.
Look at your check when you're standing there in the attorney's office too. Make sure it's made out to the right firm and make sure it's for the right amount. Come to find out how his got wrong. I don't know why, but the attorney called the seller and said, how much commission are you paying? And the seller just blurted a number out. The seller blurted out the wrong number. So you guys verify. Nobody's going to watch. Nobody's going to protect your money like you. So you guys make sure your money is right. Fair enough. Everybody promised me that. You guys make sure your money and your client's money is right. I think sometimes attorneys or paralegals, like they have us all in the system. And one thing agents like to do is change firms. I don't know. It's hard for us to get comfortable. Don't get too close to your peers. They won't be there tomorrow, right? So I think when they put us in the system with firm ABC, and then maybe we move to firm XYZ, that they already have us in, you know what I'm saying? So they don't see that change on the offer to purchase and contract. They should be looking at the contract because it's the firm that gets the commission, not me. So just make sure it's right while you're still standing there at the attorney's office. There is no shame in ripping into that envelope while you're still in the lobby and making sure that it's right. Fair enough? Questions, comments? Okay. All right, financing. Let's talk about some financing. Who can remind me in the chat? I got a $212,000 conventional 30-year loan. We'll get to the rest of that in a minute. My loan amount is $212,000. Remind me in the chat, is that going to show up as a debit or a credit to the buyer? D or C to the buyer, the loan amount, D or C to the buyer. What if I worded that a different way? On the day of settlement, is the loan amount going to be a debit or a credit to the buyer? On the day of settlement, is that money coming out of the buyer or is that money coming in on behalf of the buyer? So on the day of settlement, the loan amount will always be a credit to the buyer. The lender is showing up with that money on the buyer's behalf. Okay, the buyer cannot close without somebody saying, here's $212,000. Who's saying that? The lender saying that. So on the day of settlement, and if we go to page 2, under L as in Larry, that's right, the buyer brings a check for the rest of it, right? The lender shows up with some of it. The buyer has a check, cashier's check for the rest of it, wire transfer. So on the day of settlement, the loan amount under L as in Larry 2, L is our buyer's credits. I got a loan amount of $212,000. L2, credit to the buyer today. The buyer's going to spend the next 30 years paying that back. Why are they paying it back? Because today it was their money. It was theirs to buy their house. And they're going to spend the next 30 years paying that back to the lenders. Everybody good with that? If we think of the settlement statement as a snapshot of the day of settlement. Okay. Before we get into the loan stuff, let's go ahead and take our break, get up and stretch, get some blood flowing. We come back and we'll talk about the other loan stuff and keep going on our CD. So the time is 2:27, 2:37. We'll come back at 2:38 and keep going on our CD. All right. How are we doing so far? So far, so good? Can you guys, you kind of get what I'm saying? It's kind of two pieces, which is why you have to spend time with it. You have to know what's a debit to whom, what's a credit to whom. And the other piece of it that you will learn as you go is where stuff is on this CD, right? Instead of like hunting and pecking right now. I've been doing these for a couple years now, so I'm a lot familiar with it than you are. But I'm telling you, once you do a few of these, you're going to start, oh yeah, surveys at the top, you know, taxes are on the front, right? A lot of that is just figuring out, but if you look at it, a lot of it, it'll identify for you. So it's just my assurance to you that it will get easier. I promise. The more you do, the easier it'll get. All right, so we defined, let's see, we said the $212,000 was a credit to the buyer on the day of settlement for their loan amount. So they're getting $212,000 on their behalf. So we put that under L2. Continuing on with our finance, 30-year loan with a fixed rate of 6.5%. We'll come back to that interest rate. We'll need that in just a second, actually right now. Interest rate is 6.5%. Calculate interim interest. So let's go back and revisit interim interest. Why don't you guys remind me in the chat? If we're going to go to closing on November 23rd, when is the borrower's first mortgage payment going to be due? If we go to closing on November 23rd, when is their first mortgage payment going to be due? We go to closing on November 23rd. I'll call you from my lender. We go to closing on February 23rd. I'm sorry, November 23rd. See, you got me too. November 23rd. There is no mortgage payment the first. They're going to skip the first month. So their very first mortgage payment is going to be due, Happy New Year, on January 1st, right? They skip the first. When they make that mortgage payment in January, they're paying December's interest. Why? Because interest is paid in arrears. And your rear is where? Your rear is behind you. So you make that payment on January 1st, you pay that interest for December. Interim interest then is the lender getting caught up on their interest payment. They still owe the lender for interest from the day that they originate the loan to the last day of that month. And that's what interim interest is. Interim interest is always from the day of closing to the last day of that month. Everybody with me so far? What questions do I have so far? So I already saw Sandra whip out her fingers. What'd you get, Sandra? She counted the 23rd, 24th, 25th, 26th, 27, 28, 29, and 30. There's 8 days that the buyer owes their lender. Did you just look at that and see 7? If you did, you missed the whole problem. Not because you don't know what you're doing, but because you can't count on your fingers. So that's why I'm telling you guys, count on your fingers. So there's 8 days that the buyer owes their lender for interim interest. And now to figure out how much, we take the balance, which is the loan amount, times the interest rate. Shows you the age of this problem, doesn't it? Didn't we just say the interest rate was 6.5%? Does that sound right? Yeah, 6.5%. So you take the balance times the interest rate. The 23rd, 24th, 25th, 26th, 27, 28, 29, and 30. Is that what you're saying?
Is it not December 31 days?
I'm counting for November. Because the closing was November 30th or November 23rd, right?
Yeah.
So my knuckle trick tells me That there's 30 days. Are we good? 8 days? Oh, I see what you're saying. So you take the balance, which is the loan amount, times the interest rate to get annual interest. And then we need to take annual interest and divide by 365 to give me daily interest. You get like 3424. Again, if you're gonna round, you would do 37.753, right? At least go out 3 places. Everybody good with how I got daily interest? The balance times the interest rate gives me annual interest. Annual interest divided by 365 gives me daily interest. The buyer owes their lender for 8 days. Don't clear your calculator. If you still have the 37.753424, just say times 8 equals, and we're getting 302.03. That's what the buyer owes for interim interest. Questions before we talk about where to put it? Everybody good on how I got that? 8 days. I saw a woohoo. I like seeing woohoos. Interim interest is just the borrower getting caught up on their interest payment, the day of closing to the end of that month. So that 30203, I'm going to go back up to page 1. It's another prepaid because they're prepaying interest. Yes. When they pay interest, when they pay that 30203 today, they're paid through November. So it's a
Should that not-
prepaid under F. I'm sorry.
Should that not be 39 days?
Why's that?
The end of November and December?
Not December, just the end of that month, because you're going to pay December's interest when you make your first payment on January 1st.
Right, excuse me.
Yep. No, you're good. Good questions.
I did
Okay.
Thank John.
Yep. And that's why we say interim interest is always the day of closing to the last day of that month. Never go into the next month. You just double charge your buyer, right? Is that good? Okay. So prepaids, we're back up under F as in Frank. F3, it says prepaid interest. X amount per day. Again, if you want to fill this stuff in here, you're welcome to. What I care about is you get the 30203. And that's a borrower paid at closing. 30203, borrower paid at closing. Any questions on interim interest?
Hey, Julie, it's sort of related to that. I'm trying to envision the type of questions we're going to get, because I would have expected that the question would be something along the lines of calculate interim interest. And why would we take 20 to 30 minutes to do that?
20, 30 minutes to do what?
So in other words, I guess my question is, what does the math question look like in the exam? Is it, I would have
Like
expected.
this? You're going to
All of
see
it?
something very similar to this. Yeah, you're doing a full-blown settlement statement. Yep.
Uh-huh.
It's come
Not
4
just-
questions come from the
Not just
settlement
calculate
statement.
interest. Okay.
Correct. You're going to have 4 questions on the closing disclosure. Your other 2 math questions are standalone proration problems. So if you learn how to prorate, you're going to get a couple, right? Debit one party, credit the other party, or a double debit.
Thank you very much.
Okay, sure.
I did not like the answer, but
It is what it is, right?
blame the instructor.
No. Wait a minute.
Sorry, thank you.
Questions on interim interest. How we got the 30203. So Ariane, to your point, this is what we're doing, right? We're going through and we're studying each of these things line by line. Is this a debit to the buyers? Is this a debit to the sellers? A debit credit? Now, again, remember in the real world, we're not preparing these things, you guys. But we have to be able to review them for accuracy. So if we don't know how these things work, how are we going to review them for accuracy? Does that make sense? Okay, can I erase the interim interest math? Does everybody have this? Can I erase this? Okay. Good. Okay. Then I got a loan origination fee of 0.75%, an application fee, and one loan discount point to be paid by the borrower. Any lender fees, or in this case, are called loan fees. Any loan fees are always going to be calculated of the loan amount, not the sales price, but the loan amount. What does the lender care about? The lender cares about the loan amount, right? Because that's their money. So all lender fees, loan fees are going to be of the loan amount. We're reminded that our loan was $212,000. First up, we got an origination fee of 0.75%. So 212,000 times 0.75% gives me an origination fee of $1,590. We'll look at just a second where to put all these. There is an application fee. This is not a credit report fee. It's just an application fee that the lender's charging of $280. And then we have one loan discount point. One discount point is equal to 1% of the loan. 2 discount points would be equal to 2% of the loan. 4.5 discount points is equal to 4.5% of the loan. Everybody hear what we're doing here? The number of discount points tells you the percentage of the loan. So if you have one loan discount point, it shakes out to 1% of the loan. So I got a loan origination fee, I got an application fee, and I got a discount point. And the lender's charges are on page 1 under A, as in Apple. Your points, we have discount points of 1,280. You have a loan origination fee of 1,590, and then I just have a write-in. That's what these extra blanks are for. It has to do with the loan, with the lender. So we're going to put it under loan costs. As simple as that. Quite frankly, I don't care where you put it on page 1. Just get the 280 in the right column. So both are all three are borrower paid at closing. Questions on that? Yeah. No? Okay. So our lender fees. Can I erase? Is this good? Anybody have it? Okay. Then we have our initial escrow reserves. Remember, in addition to collecting a 12th throughout the year as part of your mortgage payment, the lender's going to want to collect a cushion. They want some money in reserve in case those bills go up. You're not losing that money. When you pay this loan off, if there's any money in your escrow, you're going to get that back. So you're just giving a little bit so the lender can pay the bills on your behalf. So at settlement, let's see, this lender, we're going to collect 4 months of taxes and then 2 months of each homeowner's insurance and mortgage insurance premium. So we need to start with knowing the annual amounts. So we got to go back up into the problem and be reminded that our annual taxes are $2,471. My annual taxes are $2,471. Instead of breaking it down to daily, this time I want to break it down to monthly. How many months in a year? 12. So we take our annual and we divide by 12 to get monthly. So each month this year, taxes are 205.92, I'm going to say, rounding just a bit. And the lender wants to collect how many months at settlement? They want 4. So if your monthly is 205.92 and they want 4 months, take your monthly times 4. Again, we'll do these and then I'll show you where to put them. They also want 2 months of homeowners insurance. So again, if I go back up in the problem a little bit, my homeowners insurance, I'm reminded, was $684. They paid the full year at settlement. In addition to paying the full year, they want some money for the escrow. So if insurance is more than $684 next year, they have some money in that cushion. They have the money that they can still pay that on the borrower's behalf. So $684 is our annual. Divide by 12. Each month, insurance is $57. The problem tells us they want 2 months. So for insurance, they're going to collect $114. And this particular lender also wants a couple months of PMI, mortgage insurance premium, private mortgage insurance. So again, we got to go back up just a little bit to find our annual PMI. We're reminded that that was $840 annual. Break it down to monthly. And they want, get away from my problem here. They also want 2 months. So monthly is $70 times 2. So this is the money that they're going to collect at settlement. All this is a debit to the buyer because it's their loan. Money they're going to collect at settlement to set up the escrow account and to have that wiggle room. So this way, if taxes are more next year, if homeowners insurance is more next year, they have some money in the escrow account to pay those bills on behalf of their borrower. What questions do I have on that before we look at the next step? I took annual divided by 12 to get monthly, and then times it by the number of months that the lender wants to collect. Still on page 1. If you guys look under G, initial escrow payment at closing. G is set aside for this initial escrow monies. So you got your homeowner's insurance, X amount per month for 4 months. Again, if you guys want to fill this stuff in, you're welcome to. What I care about is you get the number right in the column. So your homeowner's insurance, that one was the, is that the 114? PMI is 140. And then your taxes are 823.67. So for insurance and PMI, in addition to paying the first year's premium, we're also putting money in escrow. For real property taxes, in addition to prorating this year's taxes, we're also putting some in escrow. This is in addition to the annual or the proration. What questions do I have on that? Am I good if I erase? Okay. The rest of these, remember, we do what the problem tells us, right? So we know appraisal and credit report are paid outside of closing. In this case, the buyer paid for their home inspection and their pest inspection outside of closing too. So always do what the problem tells you. Y'all don't argue with the problem, okay? Always do what the problem tells you. If you really want to put these on your CD, I don't care if you do or not, but if you really want to put these on your CD, make sure you get them in the right column. You want to make sure you put them in the borrower paid before closing. So for example, we got the appraisal for $450. You got the credit report for $55. You got the pest inspection for $65 under C as in cat. And then you got the home inspection under H as in Henry for $325. Paid before closing means the buyer's already paid it. As I just said, I don't care if you put it on or not, but if you do put it on, get it in the right column. Because if you put it in this column, you're charging your buyer again for appraisal and credit report, da, da, da. They've already paid it. So everybody see this, buyer paid before closing. This is not the column you're going to be tested on. This is the column you're going to be tested on. This is your buyer paid at closing and your seller paid at closing columns. So let's make this big so we can see it. Now that we have it filled in, let's talk about what the rest of this means. I've gone through the problem. I have it all filled in. I have it complete. I'm a little rebel when it comes to doing my closing disclosure. I kind of go against the grain a little bit here. I don't care how you guys do, but let me tell you why I'm like just so off. The thing, when they first introduced us to this closing disclosure, the thing that I could not wrap my brain around, I could not see it. The closing disclosure expects you to add up. I don't know about you guys, but back in the day when I was a wee little lad and I learned how to add, I learned to add, I can't even do it now. I learned to add down. 2 + 2 = 4. The way these things work, they want you to take all the items in section A and put the tally up here. You see how this line's a little bit darker than the other blue lines? So they want me to add up 2120 plus 1590 plus 280 gives me 3990. It took my brain forever to see what we were doing there. Does that make sense? They're not asking me to add down, they're asking me to add up. When you guys are reviewing these things in the real world, A is going to have a tally, B is going to have a tally, C is going to have a tally, right? All the different categories where these lines are darker blue, all these different categories are going to be tallied here in the darker blue. Does that make sense? Is everybody good with that? So what makes me a rebel? What does Julie do that, and again, for your test, I don't even need to see your scratch paper. All I need to see at the end of the test is A, B, C, or D, right? So either add up and do it the way you're supposed to do it, or the way I do it is I tend to add it just straight down. I take out that step. I ignore this dark blue because my little brain, this is how I add. 2 + 2 = 4. I don't do 4 is 2 + 2. And that's what messes me up. So when I go through these, I take my 2120 and I take my 1590 and my 280. I have the buyer's attorney's fee of $650, $570, and $400. So I add it all up and then I get a tally here at 5610. Again, do one or the other. Either do it the way you're supposed to, or do it how you can see it, right? So you can get to these figures at the bottom. In the real world, when you're reviewing the CD, guys, we talked about I can only be responsible for numbers that I can verify. Numbers that I can't verify, I wasn't privy when the buyer and the lender had their conversation about how much the lender was going to charge the buyer. I wasn't involved in that conversation. I can't verify these numbers. I can look at them and make sure that it's not like $20,000 to originate the loan, make sure I don't have any little flags go up, but I can't verify these numbers. What I can do is add, right? I can whip out my calculator and straight line add and make sure A plus B plus C equals the $5,610. Buyer paid before closing. I don't care about that column for your test. Seller paid at closing. We have our $85 for our deed preparation fee. And then we have our buyer paid at closing, E, F, G, and H. So if you just add $82 plus 684, 840, 302.03, 114, 140, 823.67, and $30. So I add the buyer's E plus F plus G plus H, and I get $3,015.70. And then the last thing I'm going to do, and my buyer paid at closing, is add D plus I. And that's what J tells us right here. J is what? The sum of D plus I. Again, knowing the disclosure, it tells you what to do. It gives you the formulas, but you just got to spend time with it and get familiar with it. So to my $3,015.70, I'm going to add my D was 5610. So J for the buyer, I'm getting $8,625.70. That's one test question. What is the buyer's J on page 1? Multiple choice. They're not going to give you 70 cents and 71 cents, right? If you round just a little bit differently than me, you're not going to miss by rounding alone. Then I'm going to add up the sellers. We did their A plus B plus C. We got their $85. For their E, I have a $500 excise tax. I have commission. I have a home warranty. We have that courier fee. So 500, 14,979, 450, and 30. So when I tally up the sellers, E, F, G, and H right here, E plus F plus G plus H, we get 15,959. The seller's J is their D plus I. So D was 85, I was the 15. So for the seller's J, we get $16,044. These are all the seller's debits to third parties. Everything on page 1 is a debit, and it's all stuff we're paying to third parties. If you're not the buyer or the seller, you're a third party. Okay. Test question number 1. On page 1, what is the buyer's J? Test question number 2. On page 1, what is the seller's J? So somehow you got a straight line add. Somehow you got to get to the bottom of page 1. Any questions so far? The very next thing that I like to do, while it's still fresh in my mind, take these J items and put them where they go on page 2. So we're going to take the buyer's J and the seller's J. The buyer's J, all of their debits is this box K. And within all of their debits, it includes K3, which says closing costs paid at closing, which is their J. So before I forget to do it, I'm going to come over here and take that number from page 1 and put it on page 2. The same number we had for the buyer's J is now on K3. Because everything in K is all their debits, what they owe third parties and what they owe the seller. Before I do anything else, before I forget, I'm going to take the seller's J and look at box N is in Nancy. N is all of the seller's debits, including N2, which is closing costs paid at closing, which is their J. So we're going to take that number from page 1 and put it over here so we don't forget it. Everybody see what we did? Everybody good with that? So now N is in Nancy. Remember, we're looking at all of the seller's debits. That includes the debits to third parties that we calculated on page 1. So now let's just focus on the buyer. Buyers are on the left. Forget about the seller for a second. Let's just focus on the buyer. K is their debits. L is their credits. K is their debits due from the borrower. L is their credits paid already or on behalf of the borrower. So we need to add up their debits and credits. So for debits, I get $249. I got the purchase price. I got those items from J on page 1. I got their portion of the taxes that they owe the seller. I add up all their debits. I can put the total for K down here. And then we add up all their credits. L is in Larry. So we got their earnest money deposit is a credit, their loan amount is a credit, and their due diligence is a credit. We add up all their credits. And then we're going to figure their debits minus their credits. Tells us how much the buyer has to bring to closing. Debits minus credits. This is your third test question on the closing disclosure. How much does the buyer have to bring to closing? Questions on the buyers, debits minus credits. Yeah. Again, these dark blue lines, they want you to add up. They want you to add up all K and put it here. They want you to add up all L and put it here. I'm telling, however you guys see it, I'm telling, because we're not preparing it. If we were in paralegal class and I was teaching you guys how to prepare this, then this would be a totally different conversation. I need you guys to understand it so you can verify, so you can review it for your clients before settlement. So when I'm reviewing for my clients, I don't even pay attention to these dark blue lines. I just make sure that their bottom lines, I agree with those figures. Does that make sense?
I guess what I'm hearing is credit and debits, and that's
Uh-huh.
what's confusing me. Because when I'm thinking of a debit, I'm thinking subtraction, but it's really not. You're really just adding it all, and then
I'm adding them up, right? Now they're gonna, debits minus credits, right? So if you did that, you'd have a minus a plus.
yeah,
So because your debits are gonna be more than your credits for the buyer.
right. So
Right.
I guess I'm maybe thinking more like an accountant or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
just-
which is funny
okay.
because, so all we're doing is adding up all of their debits,
Okay.
add up all of their credits. And then debit, buyers are gonna have more debits and credits.
Yeah.
And I think,
So
no,
then
it doesn't tell us to subtract here, but
I
you
know.
know,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's pretty common sense.
yep. I know we tend to think of a debit as a negative, and it
Yeah.
is, in that it's money going out.
That's what confuses me.
We had to,
but,
yeah.
know.
Don't mess with negatives. There you go. Okay, other questions on how we got the buyer? So as the agent, the buyer's agent, right? The buyer reviewed the CD from their lender. How many days prior to settlement? How many business days prior to settlement? Did the buyer get this? 3 days. And I said, great, take a look at it. Do not go to the bank. Don't go to the bank until you talk to me. Once I've reviewed it, once I put my eyes on it, now I can call my buyer and say, go get you a cashier's check for $46,532.95. Okay. Once I review it. Now let's look at the sellers. Sellers are on the right. Their credits are M as in Mary, due to the seller at settlement. All of their debits are N as in Nancy, due from the seller. So money coming in are their credits. So we take our sales price. And what they're collecting from the buyer for their taxes, I'm getting their total credits of $249,907.25. All their credits, money coming in on their behalf. And then all of their debits due from the seller, including what we did in J, what we did on page 1. So all their debits, 16,044 plus 138. Add up all of their debits. For the sellers, credit minus debit tells them hopefully how much they're going to get. Hopefully they have more credits than debits. So their credits minus their debits tells this that my sellers are going to get $94,938.25. Isn't that nice? I don't know about y'all, but I've never seen a check made out to Julie Campbell for 94,000. I didn't do that right. Whatever, 94,938. I got an extra number in there. There we go. Yeah. Julie Campbell's never seen a check in the amount of that. Yeah, let me sell a house first, right? If that number's a negative, if the seller has more debits than credits, then they have to bring money to settlement too. And as the listing agent, once I review it, I call them and say, go to the bank, get a cashier's check. But again, you had this conversation with them back in the day before you ever listed their house. Remember, part of our listing agreement, we asked them for approximate loan payoff, approximate loan balances. Because if they have to bring money to settlement, they need to know as soon as possible. How much does the buyer have to bring to closing? How much is the seller going to get closing? Those are your other 2 test questions. So your 4 test questions are the bottom of page 1 and the bottom of page 2. You'll get a scenario, similar bullet points, what we just looked at. I'll let you use a blank CD. I'll let you bring scratch paper. I got to see all that before the test starts. We do a little check-in process. I spend some one-on-one time with you and get to see your calculator and your paper. We'll talk about that next weekend. This is just one closing disclosure. We're just going to lump it all together. If you want to bring a few copies, that's fine. I just need to see everything you got. Okay, so if you want to bring a couple, I just need to see it. Again, in the real world, you're going to have Most of the times, you're going to have the buyers on one closing disclosure and the seller on a different. They're going to be separated. If you want to do it on two, by all means, however you see it easier. And again, they're all different. Every single one of them are different. Why? Because every transaction is different. There's no one transaction that's the same. I often joke that the only thing consistent in this industry is change. It's not a funny joke, it's a real joke. The only thing consistent in this industry is change. If change isn't your thing, hang on to your hats. What questions do I have? Concerns, comments, aha moments, reassurance that you guys are going to work on this week and reach out to me if you have any questions or run into any problems. There we go. Now I got a reaction. Thumbs
So-
up, head bobs.
so-
Cool. Yeah.
Julie.
Yeah.
We're really just gonna have one question to fill out the closing disclosure, but you're gonna ask like those 4 different questions.
You got 4 questions.
Yes, I
So
got you.
it's the same problem for all
We don't
4.
have we don't have 4 closing disclosures we're having to fill out.
Golly, no.
That's okay. Well, that's what I was freaked out about. Okay.
No, one closing disclosure
I'm good.
that equals 4 questions. Man, y'all, I'm mean. Come on. We know I'm mean by now, but I am not
Well,
cruel.
That's a double-edged sword though, because if you screw it once, you screw it up 4 times.
Kind of. If you get this number wrong, you've gotten this number wrong, right? Because this number feeds down. Now I've seen it where this number is right and these numbers are wrong. So you could get,
Can you just
2.
give us that number?
No,
Okay.
you guys think of another way
Come
to
on,
ask me.
it's
Come on,
3:30
try
on
to come up with
Sunday.
Another way to put it.
Oh my
I
goodness.
appreciate your creativeness.
It's a simple question.
I have a simple answer. No. Yeah, 1 closing disclosure, 4 test questions. And then, like I said, you're also going to have 2 other, goodness, I'm in a good mood today. I hope you guys appreciate what I'm telling you right now. 2 other math questions that are going to be proration problems. So if you spend some time on prorating, you're going to get multiple.
Hey, Julie, since you're being so kind,
No,
Bring it on, Robert.
will there not be any amortization questions?
no, we're not doing that math.
You're
6
my
math, y'all
person.
listen to me. 6 math
You're my
problems
favorite
on your
person.
test. 4 the closing disclosure, 2 on prorations. The other 34 problems are the rest of the stuff we're talking about. No amortization, no commission math, no much. How much does the seller have to bring to closing? Or seller net, I guess that was the other one, seller net. What else did you guys have to do in pre-licensing?
Some of those are the easy ones though.
I know. All right, so let's talk for just a minute. I can't call it a homework assignment because I can't make you guys do anything, right? So either you do it or you don't. But we're going to, I think, I could do another one in class right now, but I think it'd be more beneficial for you guys to spend some time with these, to spend some time with the closing disclosures, to spend some time with your, we decided not to call it a cheat sheet, what we call guide, to spend some time with your guide to help better understand what's a debit to whom, what's a credit to whom. So instead of doing another one right now in class, we're going to wait and do another one next weekend together. And that gives you guys time to look at it, to think about it, to spend some time with it, to reach out and ask me questions. That gives you guys time to look at this. So, and it's in what, to email you this, it's right here, Learn Test Pass, the blank CD. So everybody's going to want to bring one of these for the test next week, next Sunday, or 2. I'm fine if you want to bring a couple. I just need to see however many you have. Okay, and we'll talk about that next week. There's actually 5 extra practice problems here for you guys. we're going to look at the one that you have to do for homework, homework recommendation, because there's some funny things on there that we hadn't talked about yet. So we want to make sure you guys understand the funny things. Rest assured, if you can do these 5 closing disclosures, you'll be prepared for your test next week. I'm not going to give you something funny that you hadn't seen yet. Okay. So each of these has, here's the actual closing problem. Here's the final calculation. Or is that another blank? I think that was another blank. Yeah, that was another blank. Sorry. Here's the final calculation. So each of them gives you the problem. It gives you the solutions, right? It kind of walks you through. And then additionally, something else they've provided is kind of a step-by-step. So you can go through, this is what you do with the sales price. This is where you put the sales price. So they actually give you a step-by-step to work through these. And again, remember, I'm here to help. The one you guys are doing for your homework recommendation, is closing disclosure problem 2. So I'm in Learn Test Pass under the 6B. 6B is in boy. And it's closing disclosure problem 2. And this is the one that we're going to work together next weekend, maybe Saturday or Sunday. Just depends. Maybe I'll do it Saturday afternoon. So if you have questions, you can ask before Sunday. How about that? We'll do it Saturday afternoon. Don't wait until Sunday afternoon to ask me questions. I'm telling you, this Sunday, get your questions out before next Sunday. Okay. So let's talk about the couple funny things. Make sure that we're all good. This doesn't have it, but remember, you know what? I got to get myself set up. Let's take a break. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll look at the funny things. Then I'll be able to show what I need you guys to see what's in my brain right now. So give me 10 minutes to get it together, and then I'll be able to show you what's in my mind. And then we'll be able to talk about the funny things. So 3:25. So let's come back at 3:36 and we'll talk about it. All right. Did you come back? It always means a lot to me when you guys come back after the closing disclosure discussion. Other than the fact that you have to be here and you need the credit to keep your license. All right, so I'll take attendance. You guys are coming back. First off, don't forget the one you have. I mean, all of these are for homework, right? You can do, well, I'll go back and show you that in a second. But you got the 5. I don't know if I can. Yeah, I'll have to show you in a second. You have the 5 and learn, test, pass. So as much practice as you guys can get, I think the better. The one that we're going to do in class next week is Tuesday, is closing problem 2. Is closing problem 2. So we'll do this one together. And of course, I'm available between now and then if you guys have questions. You don't have it on CD2, but some of the other ones that you guys have that you can do for homework, just remember, we don't have HOA dues written in. So when you come across problems that have HOA dues, you need to write it in and then make sure you put the amount. And remember, when you're prorating HOA dues, if this helps you, when you get your paper CD, do your DC CD so you can see this is the buyer's debits, this is the seller's credits, this is the seller's credits and the buyer's debits, right? So if that helps you to see that, by all means, it's your blank CD. You can do with it whatever you want to. If you have an HOA, it's going to be debit one party, credit the other. Same thing with taxes. Taxes and HOA that are prorated. So they're either going to go here and here, right? Debit the buyer, credit the seller, or, and I'll even get really fancy on you and change the color and say, or they're going to go here or here. So it's either going to be a debit the buyer, credit the seller, or a credit the buyer, debit the seller. Everybody good with that? And HOA dues are always a write-in. And that's why you have these extra blanks down here. You would actually type HOA and then, you know, whatever the amount is, $425, whatever it is. So it's an additional practice in prorating. Questions on that? HOA dues are a write-in. Anytime you prorate is a debit one party, credit the other. So it's either debit the buyer, credit the seller, or credit the buyer, debit the seller. Okay. So let's talk about these, the one that you're going to do for homework. Off the bat, there's an error. Not the way you're going to do it, but if you're looking at the answer solutions, if you're looking at these answer solutions, they actually have the credit report in the wrong column. We know the credit report was paid outside of closing, right? And when you look at the solutions in Learn, Test, Pass, they have it here. So I'm telling you guys, I'm reminding you guys that the credit report and the appraisal fee are going to be in the borrower paid before closing. So you guys can do it right. You'll calculate it right. But if you look at the solutions, you're going to say, why did they put the $45 over there? So the solution is wrong for some reason. But appraisal and credit report, both POC, paid outside of closing. So a couple funny things on this one. The financing on this loan, $366,000, 2% loan origination fee. Seller has agreed to pay 1 loan discount point. Well, isn't that nice? Seller has agreed to pay the buyer's discount point. Anything's negotiable, right? Anything is negotiable. So can this buyer and seller agree to this? You betcha. So what we need to talk about, the funny thing is how this looks on your closing disclosure, how this has to shake out. My loan amount is $366,000. One discount point is equal to what percentage of the loan? One discount point is equal to 1% of the loan. So far, so good, right? We're still doing it like we know, 1% of the loan. So in a sense, the sellers are agreeing to pay $3,660 for the buyer's loan discount point. Anything to do with the loan is an expense from the buyer to the seller. So to the lender, from the buyer to the lender. So in order for the lender's paperwork to come out right, we still have to show this on our settlement statement as buyer paying their discount point. The buyer has to pay their discount point to the lender. So we still have to show that amount under A1 as the buyer paying the seller discount point. So in a sense, what we're saying here is that the seller is going to reimburse the buyer for their discount point. The lender doesn't want money from the seller. The lender wants the money from the buyers. Everybody good with that? So we still got to show it on A1. The rest of this is an agreement between the seller and the buyer, not an agreement between the buyer and the lender. So now we're going to go down to page 2. And under buyer's credits, L5, you guys see where it says seller credit? Where we debit it from the buyer on page 1, now we're going to turn around and credit it to the buyer on page 2. A debit minus a credit is what? It cancels it out, right? So we debited the buyer on page 1, and now we debit the buyer on page 2. So for the buyer, that's a balance of 0. Hang on, I got one more entry. Hang on. So for the buyer, that's a balance of 0, right? Debit on page 1, credit on page 2. So how much is buyer paying for their discount points? They're paying 0. Now we got to debit the seller for that amount because they've agreed to pay it. So again, under N as in Nancy, N8, you have seller credit for $3,660. The credit canceled out the buyer's debit, and now I just have a debit for the seller. So in a sense, what we did was this. I did a debit the buyer, credit the buyer, and then I did a debit the seller. So this is what they would call a triple entry item, meaning it shows up how many times on the CD? 3 times on the CDs. Everybody see what we did there?
Julie, can you go back up to where you debited the seller?
I did not debit the seller. I debited the seller here under N8.
Okay, that's what messed me up. I thought you said debit the seller twice.
So up here, we debited the buyer, right? Debited
Right.
the buyer, buyer paid at closing, and then we reimbursed that, credit the buyer, debit the seller.
Okay, so you did debit the seller. It just isn't marked on the paper
It is on the paper. It's right here under
as a
N8,
credit.
due from the seller at closing. This is the seller's debits,
Okay.
okay? Due from the seller. So debit the buyer on page 1, credit the buyer, debit the seller on page 2. Questions on that? They good if I erase? Look at the other funny thing. Or another funny thing. Okay. Another funny thing is about the commission. Remember we talked yesterday about how the earnest money, if the firm is holding the earnest money, if the listing, the real estate firm is holding the earnest money, they have two options. They can either cut a check, send it to the attorney's office, or they can deduct commission at settlement. The agent brings back a check less than their commission. The firm transfers the earnest money from the trust account to the operating account to make that commission whole. And that's what's going on here. Commission is 5% of the sales price. At closing, the listing firm will retain the earnest money as part of their brokerage fee. So I think the example we gave yesterday in class, we had a sales price of 100,000. The earnest money was 500. No, commission, that's what it was. Commission was 3,000. There we go. We had earnest money of 1,000. So your check from the attorney's office, when you pick up your check from the attorney, your check amount's only going to be $2,000. You go back to your firm, they transfer the earnest money from their trust account to their operating account, and now they have the full commission. That's how it looks like from the perspective of your firm. So now what we need to talk about is how this shakes out on the settlement statement. So we know commission is 5% of the sales price. We come up a little bit, we see a sales price of $433,300. So my sales price is $433,300. They're paying 5% commission. So the total commission that we can expect to collect is $21,665. Do I have everybody so far? How much is total commission? $21,665 of the sales price. No, don't do that. The earnest money deposit, come back up. The earnest money is $1,000. So if your total commission is $21,600, what's the amount of the check you're going to pick up from the attorney's office once it records? You're going to pick up a check for $20,665. Your commission less the earnest money. Remember, everything on page 1 is a debit to third parties. You and I are third parties. So what we see on page 1 under H is in Henry for the brokerage commission is a debit to the seller, or excuse me, seller paid at closing. They're going to pay the firm $20,665 because that's how much commission check you're going to pick up when it's over. That's how much the third party is getting from the seller at settlement. So the commission amount minus the earnest money will be the amount on H, seller paid at settlement. The buyer will always be credited the earnest money. This does not change anything. The buyer will still have a credit for their earnest money of $1,000. We tell them when we go, when we go into contract, pay this money now to be credited back to you at settlement. But the firm still needs to collect an extra $1,000, right? The firm has that $1,000 sitting in their escrow account. So when you bring your check back from $20,600, the firm's just going to transfer. They're going to transfer the $1,000. So now the firm has their money. Everybody's happy there. The seller still owes 5% commission. So in addition to cutting the firm a check for 20,600, do you guys see here under N as in Nancy, N1, it says excess deposit? That extra $1,000 that the seller has agreed to pay commission will go there. So the firm gets the check for 20,665. That's what's an H. The buyer will get their earnest money credited back to them. And then the seller is also going to pay from settlement that extra $1,000. The seller is contractually obligated to pay this 21,665. And they are, it's just how it's shaking up on the settlement statement, because the firm's not getting the full commission. The firm's getting some commission and some transfer of earnest money.
Miss Julie?
Yeah.
Can you go back up on the right-hand side again? I just want to see what the commission breakdown was between the two. It was an even split.
What here? Yeah,
Uh,
this problem doesn't tell us that. So it's just going to be deducted. If we did have the listing firm and the selling firm, it would just be from the listing firm, because the listing firm who has the earnest money.
Which
So
would be
the
half the money.
two check amounts, right? The selling firms would be 2.5%. The listing firms would be 2.5% minus the $1,000, because
Okay,
that's the
just-
firm where the earnest money is. Ask yourself, where's this earnest money sitting? And it's going to be sitting in the listing firm if they have a trust account.
Yeah, I get that. I guess my
Yeah.
brain is just going to the fact that it looked like the listing firm was getting the whole commission, and I thought that ain't gonna happen.
Yeah. So for our purposes there, but you're absolutely right. For the real world, it would be 2.5% minus $1,000 for the listing firm. And then the selling firm would get the 2.5%. Right.
Okay, I just want to
Both of those would be
question.
on H, because that's who is being paid, the third party, the firm. But the seller still owes that full commission. So we're going to deduct an extra $1,000. So how much have they paid in commission? The 21,665. Again, there's several, you're going to see these seller paid discount points, earn it or firm to hold earnest money. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is why I want to do number 2 next week together, because it's got like all the funny things in it, right? So this is why I want to do this one together. I'd like you guys to look at all 5 this week. If that doesn't work out for you, please at least look at number 2 so we can be prepared to talk about it next week, go through it. The last, and it's not even funny, but just something to point out, because sometimes it causes confusion. So just make sure we're all good. For our loan escrow account deposits, we got 3 months of real property taxes, 2 months of homeowners insurance, and then 2 months of private mortgage insurance at a renewal rate of $75 per month. So they charge you the first year PMI, the first year premium, which will be a debit to the buyer. In addition to that, they want to collect some money. They want to put some money in the escrow. And they're not going to base the renewal fee off of the annual amount. They're going to base the renewal fee off of $75 per month. So if they want to collect 2 months, then you just take $75 times 2. And for the escrow, they'll collect $150. So this renewal is not on the annual amount that you paid at settlement. This renewal is only on $75 per month.
It may, where did they get the $75 per month when it's, it's actually more than that for the, is that just a number they just?
So if we were 1174 divided by 12, I mean, if they were looking at monthly $97.83, a lot of times when lenders do it this way, where they charge for the annual and then they roll it into your 12th of your payment. So 12th of this is in for the next year, will be part of your PITI, but you'll have PITI, PMI. So your payment will be 5 pieces. So they'll take this 1174 divided by 12, and that'll be part of your mortgage payment. But remember, as you pay your loan down, you're less of a risk to the lender. So the thinking is next year when you renew, we don't need to collect this because you're not as risky to me this year as what you were last year. You're not going to be as risky to me on year 6 as you were on year 2, right? As you pay that
Yeah.
loan down, you're less risky to the lender. So that's where they thinking they're cutting you a break here because you've
Gotcha.
been with them for a month or for a year. So now to cut you a break for your renewal fee, thank you for not being as big of a risk.
Gotcha.
But you're right, John, in this point there, when the lender does it this way, when they charge a year at a time like this, your payment is actually 5 parts: principal and interest, taxes and insurance, and PMI. So they would take that annual, divide it by 12. This is the fun of all lenders doing it differently. Isn't that a good time? Other questions? Couple funny things, but you get to do interim interest. I'd say go through it, you know. I'm telling you guys, the more you do these, the better you get at them. There's 6 questions on math. Math alone can't fail you. You can miss all 6 of the math and still pass, but what did we say yesterday? There's 40 questions and you got to get 30 right. So if you miss the 6 math, you can only miss 4 on the others. So if you can spend some time with this week, give yourself a shot. If nothing else, just guess A, B, C, or D. If you just guess something, you got a 25% chance of getting it right, right? Give yourself more than a 25% chance. And remember, I'm here all week, folks. So don't hesitate to reach out. Let me know what your questions are and how I can help. Any other parting thoughts on the closing disclosure for today? We're not done today. Do not log out. We're not done. Got a few more things to talk about, but we're wrapping up the closing disclosure. It was a big day today. And I get that too. Everybody have my phone number and my email. Y'all jot that down yesterday. Okay. If you can't find me, call Lane. Lane will get you to me. Okay. All right, so we'll do this one on Saturday, CD2. Let me show you this again real quick. CD2, all of these are in section C6B. So again, here's your blank closing disclosure. You can download it. You'll want to print one of these out. And then problem 1, 2, we're doing in class 3, and then 4 and 5 are just kind of lumped together here. Like I said, if you can do these 5 CDs, you're ready for your test, for your math on Sunday. You're ready for those.
Julie,
Yes.
I'm having some issues on my LearnPass. It's showing my pre-licensing.
So you
Like-
didn't get yourself set up right. So what
Okay.
you want to do, in the email you guys got from Lane,
Okay,
there should be a little, no, that's not the email you guys got from Lane.
I know
There
what
should
you're
be a-
talking about.
Yeah, there's like a little tutorial video. They
Okay,
show you step by step on, because you want to get connected to my closing disclosure. So
okay,
you want to make sure you click on the link and follow the steps. So watch the little video. And then if you get stuck getting into Learn Test Pass, just email Jane and here's
Okay.
her, but watch the video first.
yeah, I didn't watch the video. I mean, I didn't watch
Okay,
it.
yeah,
I just
yeah.
signed in because I thought I knew what I was doing from pre.
Yep. So that gets you connected. Because some of you guys may already have Learn Test Pass from when you took pre with Carolina School of Real Estate. We want to get you connected to my 302 Learn Test Pass.
Thank
So
you.
watch the little video. Yep, watch the little video. And if you're still stuck, call Jane, but watch the video first. Yep. I'm not the techie one, so that's why I tell you to call Jane. That's my solution. Watch the video. If that doesn't work out for you, call Jane.
I get it.
I don't know. I click on it and it works. That's what I know.
I'm not that savvy either, so I get it.
I do just fine with technology as long as it works, you know? All right. Everybody good? Any other comments, closing disclosure, last minute thoughts? Again, those of you that requested the email, I sent it this to you over break. Spend some time with that. It's knowing what's a debit and credit to whom, and it's also knowing placement on these things, right? Where's the sales price? Where's the taxes? The more you do, the better you're going to get. All right. So let's see. You guys got your private chats ready? Let's ask you a couple questions. Private chat set to me. Oh, you didn't get that? Send me an email and I'll reply. Send me an email and I'll reply with that worksheet. I just use the email you registered with. So if that's not the email you use. All right, you guys ready? Tell me in a private chat, A, B, C, or D. Commission generally appears on the settlement statement as a okay. Commission generally appears as a debit to the seller. It's money coming out of the seller's pocket. Seller pays commission. Debit to the seller, typically, unless you're told otherwise. Questions, comments on that? In a North Carolina closing, the in North Carolina, when we prorate, the seller pays for the day of closing. The seller is responsible for today's taxes. The seller is responsible for today's HOA dues. If there's rent involved, the seller gets to keep today's rent. Are we good with what we're saying in rent? Let's draw a picture real quick, make sure we're on the
Well,
same
can I-
page.
it's all misleading because interest, well, I guess interest not prorated. Never mind, I'll take that.
Yep, prorating is only a shared expense. Yep. So when we prorate rent, let's pretend that we're going to closing today. Unless you're told otherwise, rent's going to be due on the 1st of the month. So on February 1st, the seller collects February's rent from the tenant, right? The tenant paid the seller on February 1st. Property changes hands. On March 1st, who does the tenant pay rent to? This point, we're calling them the new owner, right? Right? Tenant paid the seller rent On February 1st, they're paying the new owner the rent on March 1st. The property changed hands today. So if the seller has already been paid rent, that means the seller's already collected rent for the month. Today, the tenant is the seller's, tomorrow it's the buyer's. So for rent, the seller would owe the buyer. They would pay them for rent from like tomorrow to the end of the month. Today, the tenant is the seller's, tomorrow the tenant is the buyer's or the new owner's. So to prorate rent, because the seller's already collected the whole month. So to prorate rent, we would do a debit the seller, credit the buyer for the remainder of the month. Questions on that? Okay. All right, we got a few more. We're gonna get introduced to chapter 11. We're just gonna get started on it a little bit. But as a nice break, as a nice segue, how about we just take 5 minutes? Take 5 minutes and stretch and clear our minds of closing disclosure and get ready for the last, 45 minutes or so. So let's take 5. I got 4:07. Let's come back at 4:13. When we come back, we're going to do an introduction to chapter 11. right. So we're gonna do a little introduction of chapter 11 today, kind of get us started on this part of it. When we come back together, no, chapter 10, excuse me, when we come back together and on next weekend, the star of next weekend, Saturdays are forms day. So we're gonna go over forms, we're gonna look at documents, and specifically, and y'all, I am not kidding when I say this, word for word, we're gonna look at the offer to purchase and contract. We're going through that thing, all 15 pages, word for word. So it's so important that we understand all the words that are in that offer to purchase and contract. So that's our big star for Saturday. Do our close and disclosure. We're in really good shape. So Sunday morning, we'll be able to finish up, wrap things up, fine tune things. Should even be able to do a quick review. And then Sunday afternoon, we do the test. It goes by fast. These weekend classes, it just blows my mind how fast they go. I mean, in 2 days, we've blown through 2 chapters. If you think about what all we've talked about in the last 2 days, we'll do it for a day and a half next weekend, and then we'll be good. You guys will be good to go. What was it, about 2 of you? This is your 3rd post. So you're about 1 week away from being done with post. Yay, that's exciting. And the other ones, I think, well, a couple of you are 2, and then most of you are 1 down, 2 to go. So it's a process. It's a process, but we're getting you through it. So chapter 11 is our sales contract preparations. Again, syllabus breaks it down into different sections. So to start chapter 11, we're going to discuss some sales contract preparations. Again, the star of chapter 11 is our detailed review of our standard offer to purchase and contract form 2T. And then we're also going to look at some commonly used NCAR forms, North Carolina Association of Realtors, NCAR. Look at some other forms. We've already looked at a few. So we got a few more to look at next week with our offer to purchase and contract. When it comes to us preparing the sales contract for the consumer, for the client, we are expected to do it competently. It's of my opinion, and others out there agree with me, it's of our opinion that the offer to purchase and contract is the most important document that we use in this industry, because the offer to purchase and contract is what legally binds the buyer and the seller. Okay, and we are the ones preparing this. We are the ones filling in the blanks to make them legally obligated to each other. Again, those of you that studied OCAR, that are familiar with OCAR, remember your R in OCAR. I'm not sure how this shakes out to loads. Maybe your R, skill, care, and diligence. So your R in OCAR is your reasonable skill, care, and diligence. And that's kind of a broad topic. Absolutely a broad topic, but one of those things that falls under the category of reasonable skill, care, and diligence is the ability for us to competently complete the offer to purchase and contract and any related addenda or amendment on behalf of the buyer or seller. So the Real Estate Commission expects us to possess the competence necessary to properly prepare a sales contract. These things update. Remember, the only thing consistent is change. They did an update in July of 2021. I don't know if they'll do an update this year or not, but they do like to update them. You know, I've always heard that anytime there's another legal case, another lawsuit, then our form gets updated, our contract gets updated. When they update the firms, first off, typically NCAR will only update January and July. So, and it's been a long time since I've seen them do 2 updates in 1 year. So usually what we've been seeing recently are updates in July. When they do update or change the forms, as long as you're affiliated with a firm, as long as you're active, you will know. Your broker in charge, you'll probably review it in a sales meeting, what those changes are. Your local board of realtors may provide you some training. One thing that NCAR does when they update the forms that I like a whole lot, NCAR will actually send you a or send us a markup of the old, and they'll actually show you the changes. So they'll like highlight what's new. They'll show you what was removed, right? So instead of doing an old contract and a new contract side by side and us trying to figure out what the heck changed, they actually send us a markup with the changes. So that's really important too. And again, your firms will discuss with you. If it's a big change, we'll see it in CE that year. So we'll get it across the board all over the country, regardless, or all over the state, excuse me. Regardless, it's your responsibility to always ensure you're using the current forms and always ensure that you're using the current forms correctly and properly. In addition to the form itself, the contract itself, we need to have an understanding of all the provisions, not just in the contract, but all the provisions in the addenda that we're going to use, the amendment that we're going to use. And remember yesterday, we talked about something called the parole evidence rule. The parole evidence rule says the final written word in the contract will prevail. Previous negotiations don't matter if it doesn't wind up in the offer to purchase and contract. And it is our responsibility as agents to make sure that those provisions wind up in the contract. Buyers agents, if your buyers want personal property, make sure that personal property is in the contract before you present it. Listing agents, if your seller wants to take any fixtures, make sure that those fixtures are excluded in the offer to purchase and contract before your seller sign it. I think you're going to find once you guys get really going in your careers, you're going to be using kind of the same addenda forms over and over and over again. So you'll be familiar with the ones. If you are using something that you hadn't used before, y'all read it and make sure you understand it before you send it on to your buyer or seller. Because I'm here to tell you guys something. Your buyers and sellers are not reading these forms. Your buyers and sellers are not sitting down and reading the 15-page offer to purchase and contract before they sign it. Why? Because they have you. They trust you. They rely on you. And that's why it's important that we know what's in the forms. Blows my mind. I will prepare an offer to purchase and contract with addenda, send to my buyer in dot loop with a note that says, you know, here's everything we talked about. Take a look at this and let me know if you have any questions before you sign. 45 seconds later, that thing is sitting in my inbox signed. I'm like, you did not look that over. That was like a 20-some page document I just sent you. I know you didn't look at. So guys, my point to you is, for the you will get a reader, but for the most part, they are not reading it. That's why they have you, and that's why they expect us to help them with that. I want you guys to promise me that you will never send a form to a client to sign without you reading it first, without you knowing what's in it. Everybody promise me? If you just send it on and say, just sign this, it'll be fine. Please don't do that. I'll share with you guys, I had an incident a couple years ago. It was a form that doesn't exist anymore, so I can't show it to you. But it was a form that can address contingencies. My buyers had a house to sell before they could buy this one, right? So it was a contingency. Before I buy your house, I have to sell this one. That form doesn't exist anymore. We'll talk about it tomorrow. Or next weekend, not tomorrow. Y'all just looked at me like, what? No, next Saturday. Sorry about that. So the form, the contingent form, protected my buyers, my people, in the event the buyers of their home terminated. That's what the contingency is. My guys were under contract once their house closed and they could buy this house. So the form protected their earnest money if the buyers of their home couldn't purchase. Right? Everybody with me? 5 days before we were supposed to close, we found out the buyers of their home weren't getting loan approval. And by default, because they couldn't sell, the contingency said, I'm no longer on the hook to buy yours. The agent, the listing agent, did not know about the provision where my guys were going to get their earnest money back. And when I called her and said, I'm so sorry, my guys are sick over this, but their buyers had to terminate, so we're going to have to terminate on your listing. And the agent uttered some 4-letter words and said, well, at least my seller will get her earnest money back. And I said, actually, the contingent sale addendum says my guys. And she said at that time, I'll never forget this. She said, but Julie, I already told my seller she would get the earnest money. And I said, well, I'm very sorry. I am very sorry. But the form says my guys get it. We hung up, we parted ways. I've never talked to that agent again. I wouldn't be surprised if she didn't end up having to pay that earnest money because she already made a promise to her seller that she'd get it. Why? Because she didn't read the form. So that's what, if nothing else, it could save your pocketbook if you read the form before you send it to your client. So as everybody promised, I saw some hands go up. Let's see them all. Julie, I promise that I will read everything before I send it to my clients. Thank you. It's so important that we know what we're having them, what we're telling them to sign to contractually obligate them, to contractually bind them. Comments on that or questions? I was newer into sales. This wasn't my first transaction, but it was early. And when I saw she was the listing agent, because it was a name I recognized, she was a seasoned agent that's been in it for many, many years. And I was excited about all the experience I was going to get. I didn't think it would be that kind of experience, but she still did teach me a valuable lesson. Okay. When it comes to the offer to purchase and contract, we are prohibited from drafting. We are not attorneys. I cannot draft verbiage. I cannot put verbiage. If you guys are not in the habit yet and your morning affirmations, looking at yourselves in the mirror saying, I am not an attorney, please start. Understand, you cannot draft. You cannot add provisions. You cannot strike through. You cannot cross. The only thing I'm allowed to do is fill in the blanks. They provide me the form, the pre-printed forms with blanks, and I fill those blanks in. Now let's make sure we're all good on this. Standard Form 2T is the most common offer to purchase and contract, but it's not the only offer to purchase and contract that we have to use. Our license does not say we use 2T or bust, okay? We're free to use any contract we want to. What I can't do is draft. It doesn't matter if I'm using 2T or not. I can never draft. It's not uncommon, for example, for builders to have their own contracts. Not uncommon at all. I can assist in that. I can use that. But no matter what contract I'm using, I can't draft. All I do is fill in the blanks. I will never forget, many years ago, I had this sweet young pre-licensing student come up to me on break one time. We were still in person. And she came in, young lady, and she said, all we have to do is fill in the blanks. This is going to be so easy. And I really just kind of wanted to pat her on the head because she was so sweet. Yes, it seems easy. All we have to do is fill in the blanks, right? But the problem is the blanks ask for something very specific. Just because we see a blank doesn't mean we can put any old thing in there. So yes, on the one hand, all we have to do is fill in the blanks. But I think we all know enough by now to know it's a lot more complicated than just filling in the blanks. Our forms come from NCAR, the North Carolina Association of Realtors. The National Association of Realtors has a state level in every state. So our state level of NAR is NCAR. When you join your local board, you'll get access into all three. And it's the state level that provides our forms, the standard forms that we typically use. So NCAR, the forms that we use are jointly prepared and authorized not only by the North Carolina Association of Realtors, but also the North Carolina Bar Association. So the standard forms that we use, the standard NCAR forms that we use, are drafted and prepared by attorneys. You can only use NCAR forms if you're a member of NCAR. You join your local board of realtors, it gets you into NCAR. It also gets you into the National Association of Realtors. So only members can use forms. Our forms, we rock the capital R. That R is your NAR logo if you haven't seen it yet. If you're not a member, if you choose not to be a member of NCAR, NAR, your BIC will tell you if they have a preference. If you choose not to join the Association of Realtors, you cannot use the forms with the Realtor logo on it. You may have to contact an attorney. I think NCAR has some non-member forms, but they're not going to be like standard form 2T, that kind of thing. So if you choose not to join, you got to come up with your own forms. I mentioned earlier that we don't just have to use standard form 2T. We can use any contract that we want. It's Commission Rule A.0112. I don't know that you need to know that number. I just put it there to be official. There is a commission rule that says if we're using any sales contract form, it has to meet these requirements of A.0112. Specifically, they mentioned 19 different things that must be in any form that we use. So again, everybody understand, I don't have to use NCAR forms. I can use any form I want to. But if I'm using another form, it's got to be drafted by an attorney, and it still has to meet Commission Rule A.0112. We're not going to go through those provisions. I'll be happy to show them where you can find them if you're interested. But again, rest assured, the forms that we do typically use from NCAR were prepared by attorneys, and they do follow the rules. I tell you one thing that's absolutely not allowed to be in the offer to purchase and contract. Absolutely not allowed to be in the offer to contract, and that's me and you. Brokers don't belong in the sales contract because I'm not a party to the contract. Who are the parties to the contract? The buyer and the seller. Specifically, the Real Estate Commission says we cannot make any mention of our commission or compensation. Would it surprise you guys if I told you in the past there's been agents that try to slip themselves a bonus into the offer to purchase and contract? They see a blank, and they're like, I'm going to make me $500 extra. I'm going to put this in. They sign it and they think it's going to stand up in a court of law. Commission says, y'all stop doing that. Where do we discuss our commission? Where do we get buyers and sellers to agree to how much they're going to pay us and when?
Listing agreement.
Yeah, our agency agreements, right? We discuss commission in both the listing agreement and the buyer's agency agreement. That's where we discuss commission, not in the contract. We also cannot have anything in the contract specifically, again, big picture, you and I don't belong. But specifically, we also can't have any kind of liability disclaimer to protect our actions. Remember earlier today, we looked at our professional services disclosure where the seller could like waive the survey, for example, I mean, the buyer could waive the survey. That form is there to prevent us from putting any kind of liability disclaimer into the offer to purchase and contract. If your buyer said no to the survey, you might be tempted to put a provision in there to protect yourself. Buyer waive survey. That kind of thing doesn't belong in the contract. That's why we have that separate form of the professional services disclosure. So again, the big picture says, I don't belong in the contract. Specifically, the Real Estate Commission says no mention of our commission or any liability disclaimer for my actions or non-actions. I suggested they get a survey, does not belong in the offer to purchase and contract. So this is always interesting. While you and I can't draft and add and delete, the parties to the contract can. They are the parties to the contract. Guys, bottom line, buyer and seller can agree to sell and buy a house on a subway napkin, right? They don't need the official forms. It's when you and I get involved that they need the official forms. Now, I don't know if a subway napkin will hold up in a court of law or not. But bottom line, the parties can agree to whatever they want to. They can alter, amend, or delete. They can draft their own contracts. They can draft their own document. But guys, just because they can doesn't always mean that they should. When your buyer or seller start talking about whipping out their pen and making, oh, I'm going to delete this and add that, I'm going to do. Everybody take a big deep breath. And that's where we need to step in and highly recommend that they talk to an attorney before they start butchering this thing up and making all these changes. Because here's the thing, I always think of the domino effect. They don't know, because they're probably not attorneys. They don't know by the effects. If I change this provision, how does it affect another provision somewhere else in the contract? They don't know how the contract is intertwined and how it works. So if I change this, it might affect something else down here. And the best thing that we can do to protect our clients is say, please don't draft or edit or amend. Please contact your attorney. Let's talk to our attorney and see what they suggest, what they recommend. I'm lucky. I've never had a buyer or seller say, we're going to fix that. But evidently it's a thing because we're here talking about it. Questions or comments on that? Just because they can does not always mean that they should. And I can't tell because I'm not an attorney. So when they say, well, when I change this, what's it going to be? I don't know. I can't interpret legal documents. I can't tell you what this change is going to do somewhere down the road.
Hey, Joy.
Yeah.
Have you ever had a client, after you send them a copy of the contract, try to take that contract and do something with it on their own? I know they can't use it because they're not licensed or they're not affiliated with the Realtors Association, but has it ever happened to you?
Not that I know of. So we're not sending them, like they can't go in and I see what you're saying. They can't go in and change my blanks, right? But they now have a PDF. Can't you sit down and type out a PDF on their own? Yeah, not that I know of, not that they ever called and told me, but goodness, Robert, I'm sure that happens
I hope I
frequently.
didn't jinx you.
I'll let you know. No, but yeah, I mean, I think there would be some copyright infringements, right? I think there would be several other things going on. And the fact too that, yeah, they're retyping their own, but the fact too that, no, I could see all sorts of things going wrong with that. See it go wrong fast. The whole reason we have standard forms is to help give us uniformity. And it helps reduce our temptation to draft. By providing us with standard forms, all we have to do is fill in the blank. They give us the information. If it's not in the contract, then I probably have an addenda for it. If I don't have an addenda for it, then this is truly a unique scenario and we need to have an attorney draft it up. It also sure does make things convenient, doesn't it? Could you imagine if we didn't have standard forms? If we had to call an attorney every time your buyer said, this is the one I want to make an offer. So you're out showing property on Sunday afternoon. Your buyer says, I like this one. I want to make an offer. And you say, great. I'll call the attorney's office first thing tomorrow morning and make an appointment. You call the attorney. They say, we can get you in 3 weeks from now. You say, wonderful. We would never get anything sold, would we? We'd spend more time trying to get into the attorney's office to get them to draft your buyer a contract. So thank you, Forms Committee. Thank you, NCAR, for providing us these forms. If nothing else, we can keep things going. And as we say, it gives me and you uniformity. When you send me an offer on my listing, I know what to expect. I know what to look for. So we have a couple different types of contracts. The one that we're going to spend our time with next weekend on Saturday is standard form 2T. Now, again, you don't need the number, but I refer to it as standard form 2T. So we all know we're talking about the one that we use the most. This is the most commonly used one, is standard form 2T. We also have 12T, which is situations with vacant lot or land. There's no structure on the property. You're selling land, vacant lot or land. So we have an offer to purchase and contract for that scenario. We have 800T, which is an offer to purchase and contract for new construction. We'll look at these briefly next weekend. But again, the star, the highlight of the show next weekend will be 2T. I think I asked yesterday, one of you was, I got the commercial, considering commercial. Commercial has their own set of forms from NCAR. And the commercial forms, the contract is the agreement for purchase and sale of real estate. All the commercial forms in NCAR, this is just FYI, are a 500 series. So if you ever get your hands on a commercial form by accident, if it's a 500 series, it doesn't apply to residential. And I've had a lot of commercial agents tell me that 580T is very generic and doesn't apply to a lot of commercial situations. So they end up drafting their own contract anyway. Commercial is a totally different beast. I don't know a whole lot about life, but I know residential and commercial are two totally different things. So commercial has their own set of forms. Again, just kind of pay attention. All the numbers of the forms are at the bottom right-hand corner. So just make sure if you're using anything 500, you got the wrong form. So the Real Estate Commission, actually, let me rephrase that. The North Carolina Association of Realtors, for the majority of our contracts, all but the commercial ones, so 2T, 12T, and 800T, they provide us guidelines for completing. We'll look at that again next weekend too. And in the guidelines for completing, for example, 2T, they provide us with general instructions for completing the form, things that we should consider when we're preparing these contracts. The first thing that they recommend is type if possible, otherwise print legibly in ink. I mean, guys, come on, it's 2022. Your firm has access to .loop, DocuSign, zip form, something like that. If you get the opportunity to write an offer on the trunk of your car, then just make sure that you're doing so legibly in ink. Pencil's not going to hold up in a court of law. So make sure you're doing it legibly in ink. Don't leave any blank. Fill in all the blanks. This does two things. If I'm writing an offer for a buyer and I present an offer with blanks not filled in, the seller and the listing agent may think I didn't complete the offer. So at least if I acknowledge NA, not applicable, at least if I put that in, they know that I didn't accidentally leave a blank. The second thing this does, if I leave a blank, it doesn't allow the other side to slip something in there. So never leave a blank. If it's not applicable, put NA, not applicable. We need to be precise. As we talked about yesterday, we got our own lingo. We got our own jargon. Yeah, that doesn't belong in the offer to purchase and contract. This is the agreement between the buyer and the seller. They need to be able to understand their sales contracts. So don't put acronyms in, don't put our real estate lingo, don't put abbreviations, spell it out, be clear, be precise. Every change, addition, deletion has to be initialed and dated by all parties. This is more old school when we were dealing with paper. But even today in our electronic world, if you make a change and save it, it keeps the old version. .loop, you cannot delete anything in .loop. Have you ever tried? Once it's there, it's there. And it was designed that way. It was designed that way on purpose because they don't want me throwing away old stuff. They keep every version, every revision. If you're still doing it old school on paper, make sure you're indicating that change, addition, or deletion. If you're old school on paper and you make numerous changes, after a while, it's going to get kind of hard to read. So the suggestion is once you guys come to agreement, once you come to term, prepare you a nice, neat new contract with the agreed upon terms. Keep the old. Keep the old, because the old shows the meeting of the minds. The old shows that we negotiated, we crossed out the purchase price and initialed and dated and then crossed it out and right? That shows our meeting of the minds. That shows the two parties. So you can prepare a nice, neat new one, but always keep the old. And then make sure you review the contract provisions with the parties. Y'all don't sit down and try to read it to them. They can read, they just choose not to. However, we need to have conversations with our buyers and sellers. I mean, think about it. With buyers, we need to have conversations such as like, what is due diligence fee? What is earnest money? What's going to happen to that money? What happens if you terminate? You know, so we need to, well, we're not going to read it to them. We need to be familiar enough with them that we can have discussions. I miss showing, you know, I miss back in the day when you could spend like a Saturday with a buyer and there were like 10 properties to look at. With low inventory, we don't get that ability anymore. But if I could spend a Saturday with a buyer from house to house, that's when I would have my conversations about due diligence and earnest money. And as soon as you go under contract, I need you to write me 2 checks and, you know, da, da, da. Today, it's like, I mean, it's crazy, right? Buyers are just sitting at their computer hitting refresh. Something hits the market and they're like, let's go see it right now. You know, so we don't have the time, but you know what, guys, we need to make the time. Even in this crazy hustle, bustle, hubbub of a market that we're in, we still owe the buyers that duty to explain to them the provisions, explain to them what happens when they present their offer's accepted and we go under contract. So review it with them, don't read it to them, but make sure they understand. Any questions about these general instructions, anything we've said so far? The Real Estate Commission has identified some persistent problems with us completing the offer to purchase and contract. They've said, stop it right now. So they're trying to get to you guys before you start bad habits. So some persistent problems they see in the contract that they're tired of seeing. Problem number 1, in the line of the seller, agents writing owner of record. There's absolutely no reason when you're completing a contract on behalf of a buyer that you can't put all of the seller's full legal names in that line. The Real Estate Commission says it's lazy, it's not sufficient. You got to pull the deed anyway. Guess what's on the deed? The owners of record, the names of the sellers. So when it comes to the contract, now I know you might see this in MLS. I'm not talking about MLS. I'm talking about the offer to purchase and contract. They said, stop putting in owner of record. We're listing things that don't need to be listed. Let's think about this. A fixture is meant to stay, right? A fixture is something permanent that's meant to stay when we convey. Personal property is meant to go. The only time fixtures and personal property need to show up in our offer to purchase and contract is when they're going to do the opposite of their intent. So if a fixture is going to go or personal property is going to stay, that's when we put it in the offer to purchase and contract. Stop listing stuff just for the sake of listing stuff. We got a whole fixtures list in our contract that we'll see next week. And any agreed upon personal property that's going to stay. Another problem they're seeing is defining critical dates. We fill in a date for the due diligence period. We fill in a date for settlement. put a date. Don't put 20 days from the effective date. Nobody knows what the effective date is. And is that 20 days? Does that count Sunday? Is that holiday? Just put in a date. If you wanted 20 days from the effective date, then you go to your calendar and you count it out and you put an actual date in there. So define critical dates. I love you guys. I see you guys shaking your head like, really, this happens? I know, right? This last one will really get you. You want to know what a persistent problem is that the real estate commission's tired of seeing? I don't understand this one. Why are we not presenting offers to our sellers in a timely manner? Why are we saying, well, I'll get to that next week? Who remembers? I have to present offers to my sellers when?
That first chance, immediately.
Immediately. And Penelope, but no event later than 3 days. The rule says we present offers to our sellers immediately, but in no event later than 3 days.
I just don't get how anyone could wait. I mean, I'm like,
Thank you.
I'm like, you know, gotta
Are
get
you
this done, gotta
so
do this.
busy that you can't present this? Why would you
I guess
not want to
that's the
present it so you could go under contract so you can get paid? Right? If you don't have your seller's best interest, sure you have yours. I'm with you. This blows my mind. Okay, so what if I'm going on vacation? Maybe I'm going on vacation. I agree. Sometimes we just get lazy, but you can't get paid if it doesn't go under contract. So why would you not present the offer? So what if I'm going on vacation this week, or what if I'm sick? Right? This is why you guys have peers. This is why you guys have people in your office. This is why you have a broker in charge. Call somebody and ask for help. You know, hey, I'm going to go on vacation this week. Can you help me out? Or, hey, I'm sick. Can you help me out? You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, right? If you help me when I go on vacation, then guess what? I'll probably help you when you go on vacation. So you can't, I don't know if it's we're afraid to ask. I don't know. I'm not sure. But y'all, are we good with this? Don't let me hear about you guys. Oh, well, I decided to wait till Friday. You get an offer in your hand, you present it. It's pretty simple. The other persistent problem the commission sees that we've already talked about is how we handle the due diligence request and agreement. Remember yesterday, we discussed this. The repairs have to be agreed on in writing and signed by 5 p.m. of our due diligence date. The repairs themselves don't have to be complete until prior to settlement or whatever the parties agree to, whatever other arrangements the parties agree to. So obviously, buyers agents, you want to encourage your buyers to get their inspections done in a timely manner. So if they do want to ask for repairs, we give the seller time to think about it, seller the time to consider. But understand that we just have to have the agreement in writing and signed while we're still in due diligence. The repairs themselves don't have to be complete until prior to settlement or whatever other arrangements the parties come to. Is everybody good with that? What questions or comments do I have on that? So this is exactly where I wanted to end up today. So when we come together on Saturday, at some point we'll do CD2. Remember your homework recommendation, some point on Saturday. But probably when we start next Saturday morning, we're going to start with doing our line by line review of our standard Form 2T offer to purchase and contract. Now we got some pages in the book that reference some of the provisions we're getting ready to talk about. I'm going to point out the guidelines, but our main focus is going to be on that standard Form 2T. Questions? Well, as I said, that's where I wanted to get today. So I don't want to say anything else. Look at you guys, 7 whole minutes to spare. Let me know if I can help with anything this week. I'm around. Otherwise, you guys have a great week. Why don't you go sell a house so you can go back and tell us about it on Saturday? Your other homework assignment. No, I'm just kidding. So, so we love hearing your success stories and everything. You guys have a great week. I will see you guys next Saturday at 9 o'clock. Use the same Zoom link. Keep that email from Lane. Use that same Zoom link. Y'all getting to Learn Test Pass. Call Jane if you're, or email Jane if you're having problems. And I'll see you guys on Saturday.
Bye.
Bye. Have a good week.
You too.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you.